You've probably had a day where everything felt like it was falling apart. Money, deadlines, that low hum of dread that tomorrow might be worse than today. Now stretch that feeling across 70,000 years. That's not a metaphor. That's the actual history of your species. And the real story of how you made it to the other side is far stranger than anything you learned in school. Somewhere around 74,000 years ago, a volcano in what is now Indonesia erupted with a force no human has ever witnessed since. It was called Toba. The sky darkened for years. Temperatures dropped. Forests that had fed humans for generations began to die. Geologist and anthropologist Stanley Ambrose at the University of Illinois studied the ash layer this eruption left behind. He found something strange buried inside human DNA. Our genetic diversity is oddly low, lower than you'd expect for a species this old, this widespread, this successful. His theory was simple and unsettling. At some point, humanity nearly didn't make it. The entire species may have shrunk to a population small enough to fit in a few modern villages, maybe a few thousand people, maybe fewer. Think about that for a second. Every person alive today, every language, every civilization, every argument you've ever had with your family, all of it traces back through a bottleneck so narrow it could have closed completely. What kind of humans survive something like that? Not the strongest, not the fastest, something else entirely. On the southern coast of what is now South Africa, there's a cave called Pinnacle Point. For over a decade, archaeologist Curtis Marean and his team dug through its layers, and what they found rewrote the story of human survival. While much of the interior of Africa dried into hostile grassland during the coldest stretches of the Ice Age, a small population survived by doing something almost nobody expected. They turned to the ocean. Marean's team found shell middens, piles of discarded shellfish dating back over 160,000 years. Mussels, whelks, small, reliable, unglamorous food. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't dramatic. It was consistent. And consistency, it turns out, is what survival actually looks like. Here's the part that should stop you. In those same layers, Marean found pieces of ochre engraved with deliberate, repeated patterns. Not decoration, symbols. This is some of the earliest evidence of abstract thought anywhere on Earth. Coming from a tiny population clinging to a rocky coastline during the harshest climate swing our species has faced. Why there? Why then? Because pressure doesn't just break things. Sometimes it compresses them into something denser, sharper, more capable. Around 50,000 years ago, something shifts again in the archaeological record. Stone tools become more refined. Jewelry appears. Long-distance trade networks emerge, meaning small bands are trading materials with groups they've never met hundreds of miles away. Paleoanthropologist Richard Klein at Stanford called this shift the human revolution. Before it, tools had barely changed for hundreds of thousands of years. After it, culture starts accelerating in a way that looks almost modern. Klein has argued this wasn't just a slow accumulation of skill, it looks more like a switch flipped. Some researchers think it was a subtle genetic change affecting language or planning. Others think it was simply that enough humans survived in close enough contact to start teaching each other faster than before. Either way, the pattern is the same one you saw at Toba and the same one you saw at Pinnacle Point. Scarcity didn't just threaten humanity, it shaped it. Small, isolated groups, harsh, unpredictable environments. And somehow, out of that, cooperation, symbolism, and the beginnings of everything we now call culture. Here's what's strange, though. None of this was inevitable. Geneticist and paleoanthropologist John Hawkes has pointed out that human evolution didn't slow down after we became modern. If anything, it sped up. The pressures never really stopped. They just changed shape. You are not descended from the humans who had it easy. You are descended from the ones who had almost nothing and figured out how to share it, adapt it, and survive it together. So what does this actually mean for you, sitting here right now, in a life that has central heating and grocery stores and none of the immediate threat of starvation? It means the machinery in your brain that handles stress, that scans for danger, that clings to small routines when everything feels unstable, wasn't built for your current life. It was built in caves, on coastlines, during ash-darkened skies that lasted years, not days. When you feel overwhelmed by uncertainty, when your body reacts to a stressful email the same way it would react to a real threat, that's not a malfunction. That's an inheritance. Your nervous system is running. Software written by people who survived a volcanic winter by eating shellfish and scratching symbols into rock, because it was the only thing keeping them tethered to meaning in a world falling apart. There's a reason humans form tight social bonds under pressure. There's a reason isolation feels unbearable, and shared ritual feels calming, and repetitive small tasks feel soothing when everything else is chaotic. Those aren't quirks. They're survival strategies, refined over 100,000 years, in populations so small that losing even a handful of people could have ended everything. You carry that. Every time you reach out to someone during a hard week, instead of withdrawing completely, you are running an ancient program that once meant the difference between a lineage continuing and a lineage ending at Toba's ash line. And here's the counterintuitive part. The humans who made it through the worst of the Ice Age weren't defined by raw toughness, they were defined by flexibility. They ate what was available, even if it wasn't what their ancestors ate. They moved when they had to. They formed alliances with strangers when isolation became a bigger threat than the unfamiliar. Rigidity is not what got you here. Adaptability is. Modern life doesn't ask you to eat shellfish during a volcanic winter, but it does ask you, constantly, to adapt to things you didn't choose and didn't see coming. A sudden job loss, a diagnosis, a relationship ending without warning. Your instinct might be to see this as unique to you, as a personal failure to keep things stable. But look back far enough, and instability is the actual baseline of human history. Stability is the anomaly. The version of your ancestors who survived weren't the ones waiting for things to go back to normal. They were the ones who built a new normal out of whatever was left. Scientists have now tracked this pattern of near collapse and adaptation across more than 100,000 years of human history through ash layers, shell middens, engraved ochre, and the quiet mathematics of our own DNA. And the pattern never changes. Pressure arrives, populations shrink, and the humans who make it through are the ones who adapt, who stay close to each other, who find some small, repeatable thing to hold on to until the sky clears again. You are here because of thousands of ordinary decisions made by people who had every reason to give up and didn't. Not because they were fearless, because they kept adjusting, kept helping each other, kept finding some sliver of stability in the middle of collapse. So the next time your whole life feels like it's falling apart, remember this. You're not failing some modern standard of having it together. You're just doing what your species has always done, since long before cities, before agriculture, before writing, before almost everything you'd call civilization. You've had a day where everything felt like it was falling apart. So did every single ancestor who came before you, stretching back 70,000 years into the ash and the dark. And every one of them found a way through. That's not just their story anymore. That's the story already written into you. If this made you see yourself differently, hit like and subscribe. There's always a stranger truth waiting. You just have to look.